So based on what we know so far, Michael, for this historic indictment to go forward, how strong is this case?
It remains to be seen. We have to wait for the indictment to be unsealed. Right now, no one has seen the actual charges. The speculation is that Donald Trump will be charged with multiple counts of making false business entries on his ledger. Those arise from his repayment of Michael Cohen, his former lawyer, who had made a $130,000 hush payment to Stormy Daniels, a woman who claimed to have had an affair with Trump. And Trump wrote those deductions on his business record as if they were legal expenses. That was, according to the prosecutors, a fraud. It's not true. And he's going to be charged with all of those. The then question is, how do they get this to be a felony? Because those are only small misdemeanor charges. And the theory there is that he made these payments in an effort to avoid federal election campaign reporting requirements. That's the challenge of this case. Can they make this from a misdemeanor, which seems pretty straightforward, to a felony, which is a much more dicey proposition?
Now, as we look ahead to the next steps, of course, part of that will be the unsealing of the details in the indictment. But we know that Trump is set to be arraigned on Tuesday. You've held senior positions in the U.S. Department of Justice. We're going to have a mugshot of a former U.S. president come next week. How significant is the development here of this indictment?
Well, it's historic in the sense that no former president has engaged in conduct that merited an indictment, save for Richard Nixon, who was pardoned. So, it's unusual, but what's more unusual is a president engaging in criminal conduct. So you can't say, well, the prosecutors are going, overboard and charging a person and it's historic. What I think one has to refocus their view is that what is historic is the actions of the president that necessitated holding him accountable through a criminal indictment.
Now, you did list out some of the things that you'll be keeping a close eye on when we know the indictment will be unsealed. And so I'm looking at what you'll be watching for as we get those details.
Right. What I'm going to be looking for most is how they make this case from a misdemeanor, the business records false entries, to a felony, which means the false entries in furtherance of another crime, and what that other crime is. Because it would seem to me that just indicting the president on a group of misdemeanors would not be worthy of the prosecutor's time. It needs to be something more serious, and getting to that more serious thing is what I'll be looking for. How do they get there? And is that sustainable in a court of law? Can they prove it beyond a reasonable doubt?
Can you tell us more about the role Michael Cohen plays in all of this?
Right. So Michael Cohen, we take a step back. Stormy Daniels alleges she has an affair with President Trump back in 2007. She denies it in 2011, which makes her, doubtful witness. She claims this money was, she claims the affair. Trump, to silence her, pays through Cohen $130,000 in hush money so she wouldn't tell her story. Cohen is the only person who can link Trump to her. And we'll see whether he's credible, because remember, he pleaded guilty to lying and campaign finance charges a few years back. And so you're going to have a witness here who has a motive, will be argued by the defense, for getting revenge against Trump. And so the jury is going to have to decide whether or not they believe Cohen, or whether he's just a person with a grudge who will say anything to get even with the person who ruined his life.
No question, there's some challenges with the so-called star witness for the prosecution in this, to your point. Finally, I wanted to ask you, when it comes to this specific case, there of course are the legalities to do with it, but no matter what, when we turn to the conversation about what's happening right now, the legal aspects of it and the political aspects of it do intersect in those conversations. So there is the claim from the former U.S. president that this was politically motivated. How much credence do you give to that sort of criticism, and we are hearing a lot of it.
We'll have to see the indictment. If the indictment makes out a compelling case for violations of criminal laws, then it's really hard to argue that it's politically motivated, because in our system of justice, as is in the case in yours, no one is above the law, as the phrase goes. And if he violated the law and that law requires accountability, then it's not really a political motivation. He's a political actor. And so an indictment against any politician will have political implications. But if the charges are true, and if he can be proved to have done this conduct, then it's not a political prosecution. It's just a prosecution against a politician. And that happens all the time. Governors, mayors, city council members, they're all prosecuted. So the fact that he's a former president makes him unique in one sense, but really bread and butter stuff for public corruption prosecutors.
A lot more to come on this story. Thank you for your time today, Michael.